Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you Praizion, the company behind the training, has, like I said, trained so many entities, and you can see some of them up here. So I wanted to give you a warm up for chapters 1 to 3, but I decided I'll leave that. So let's talk about some base terminology, common terminology in the world of the PMI, and all of this stuff is here in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Projects. What is a project? Temporary endeavor, right? Temporary endeavor undertaken to deliver a unique product, service, or result. All right, programs. A program is a collection of two or more interrelated projects, right? And we manage them in a coordinated way because we're trying to obtain certain benefits and control that are not available by managing them on their own. Think about a hardware project, a software project, an integration project. On their own, they don't give you much of a benefit, but put them together, the hardware is nothing without the software is nothing without the hardware, and the integration needs to wrap them all up. Program management is looked at as managing these interrelated projects by applying knowledge and skills and tools and techniques. Portfolio, you've probably heard the term portfolio being used loosely. But in the world of the PMI, a portfolio is the collection of all the work within a unique business or a firm. But it's this work that we're doing to meet our organization's strategic business objectives. That's why we work on the work in the portfolio. So you can think of portfolio management as doing the right work, doing the right stuff. You don't want to be doing white elephant projects. And who calls the shots? It's the portfolio manager. Operation, repetitive work that is ongoing to support the business. PMO, Project Management Office. This is a group of people or a department in a firm that is known to provide project management support, project management training, templates, and expose you to what is new in the world of project management, hopefully. And there are different types of PMOs. These are all talked about again in the PMBOK guide. So when we come to class proper, you will get a very concentrated dose of all of this stuff. So I'm only covering them for the benefit of those who may not know, who may have no clue about what these are. But when we get to class, we will cover them in more exam level detail. Stakeholders, who are stakeholders? People that can affect the project, people who are interested in the project, people who think that they are interested in the project. What are phases? Phases are just segments in a project, key segmentations in a project. And phases end when you get to a point and you deliver something, or you get to a phase exit where there needs to be a review before going to the next phase. And phase characteristics. When you think about phase characteristics are exemplified in the fact that you could have overlapping phases or you could have sequential phases. And so in the world of the PMI, they look at projects as being authorized or live only when the project charter has been presented and approved, by the sponsor. So our main objectives in integration in this very quick review, again, it's a very rapid review, are to first of all define integration, discuss how integration differs from other knowledge areas. So the tools and techniques of integration, we're going to take a look at that under the microscope, and we're going to explain how outputs from one process become inputs to another. So let's talk a little bit about what integration is. Integration is all about the combination of stuff. Can you imagine if you had flour, eggs, milk, and sugar, and you just ate them one by one? What good is that? But when you put them all together in the right mix, in the right quantity, you get a fantastic product. You get a cake. When you bake it, right? When you turn on the oven and you put it in and the cake comes out. That's how integration is. Integration is the unification. You see? It's the unification of everything in project management: risk, scope, schedule, cost, quality, procurements, everything. All of those things on their own are good, but if you don't unify them, it's no good. So integration is like putting that cake together. Ahmed said cake, you better believe it. It's like putting all of the ingredients for your project together to come out with a cohesive, bulletproof way of managing your project, okay? And that's the job of the project manager, to know how to coordinate, unify, and combine the different areas of project management, okay? So I'm going to show you really quickly now. First process in integration management, the very first process is called Develop Project Charter. And this is where the project charter is developed. This is where you are putting together a document that authorizes the project. Simple in the world of PMI. No charter, no project. No charter signed by the sponsor or approved by the sponsor, no project. Now, those of you reading the 5th edition exam, that's fine. You can stay on because, you know, I'm not dishing out anything that you don't already know. And none of the stuff that I'm dishing out is going to be harmful to the attendees who are on the 5th edition trajectory. But it's a good reminder. Bear in mind, the PMI, they are not updating the PMP exam content outline. So that should tell you that there's quite a lot of similarity. But there are a few additions and differences which you definitely do not need to know. And when it comes to that time, I'll let you know that as well. So I'm going to read page 75, very similar to the 5th edition text. It says, Develop Project Charter is the process of developing a document that formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities. The key benefits of this process are that it provides a direct link between the project and the strategic objectives of the organization, creates a formal record of the project, and shows the organizational commitment to the project. So if you didn't already know, I am a stickler for highlighting the PMBOK guide. As you can probably see, my PMBOK, I believe in highlighting the PMBOK guide, honing in on those areas. So if you have not highlighted, I don't care whichever edition you're reading, you need to highlight that bad boy up. You need to make sure the keywords and the key phrases are highlighted for your review, your final reviews especially. It says projects are initiated by an entity external to the project, such as sponsor, program or project management office, or a portfolio governing body chairperson or authorized representative. So a lot of people, they think, oh, the project manager can develop the project charter and they are responsible. No, they're not. The project manager may find him or herself working with the project sponsor in developing the charter, right? But the authority of that charter is actually the project sponsor. And it happens in initiating, okay? This process, if you really do the math, is worth 6.5% on the PMP exam. So what are they going to ask you on the exam? Whatever the exam, you can be sure they're going to ask you what is in the charter. What is in the project charter? Because that's the process, develop project charter. So obviously we're going to get a charter out, right? I'm curious to know, guys, the projects that you guys manage in your firms, is this a fairy tale or do you actually work with a project charter? Lokesh, very good to see you. I had no idea you were going to join. Ahmed said, most of the time EEFs and OPAs confuse me. Well, thank you for letting me know that. I'm going to address those for you. And this is exactly how the live classes are going to be. You got a question, you can be rest assured I am going to hit those questions in depth, in detail. So you're not going to go away wondering, oh, EEFs and OPAs, I'm going to address it for you. All right? So first of all, I talked about the project charter and what is in it. So let's take a look at that. Very high level. Project purpose on page 81. Project purpose, measurable project objectives and related success criteria, high-level requirements, high-level project description, boundaries and key deliverables. Overall project risk, summary milestone schedule, pre-approved financial resources. key stakeholder list, what constitutes project success, project exit criteria, assign project manager, name and authority of the sponsor, or other persons authorizing the project charter. So there could be other persons. It doesn't always have to be just the project sponsor. There could be other people in the steering committee who need to sign off on that thing, all right? Now, if you take a look at the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, and you go to where this table is of the inputs and outputs for developed project charter, namely this one right here, this one, right? If you take a look at that table, you can see part of what Ahmed is talking about, because we've got enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets listed. So I'm going to show you really quick, just to answer his question, I'm going to give you guys an idea of what these EEFs and OPAs are, because we hear them quite a lot, don't we? Enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets, we hear those quite a lot. So I'm going to address those for you. So enterprise environmental factors, very high level. These are factors that could influence a project positively or negatively. The key thing is this: they are factors, 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 right? Factors that could influence your project. For example, we don't have enough resources to manage this project. Your project's going to go down the tubes. You're going to be in trouble. It's a factor. You see, it is not the resources that is the EEFs. It's the availability of the resources. Here's another one: marketplace conditions. The marketplace is so saturated right now that there's no way we're going to be able to be first to market in this new space, or there is no way we're going to be able to get ahead. So why do this project? The marketplace is saturated. Let's wait for a more convenient time. Or it could be perhaps the price of a commodity that you need for the project is so high that it's almost impossible to run the project. For example, one of my clients, they use copper, and there was a time back in 2008 or 9 when copper, the price of copper was a bit problematic, and they were not able to work on projects as they were used to. Marketplace conditions, government standards and regulations. These standards and regulations could be factors that could influence your project. And the systems for managing projects, we call those project management information systems. The availability of a system or the lack of a system, right, or the presence of a system is going to influence how you manage your project. SAP. I remember when they launched SAP, I was at a well-known aerospace firm, and boom, SAP showed up on the horizon, and they said, look, you guys need to use the antiquated system. Move to SAP. People dragged their feet and moaned and complained, and management said, look, you either do it or you jump the ship. So everyone had to learn, and that changed the way we manage projects. It was a factor that influenced how we managed our projects, okay? So let's take a look at these EEFs, because in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, in Chapter 2, they are extremely big on the environment that projects are in. So I'm going to give you a wholesome definition of these EEFs and OPAs, Ahmed. And I see that you've chatted in. I'm going to look at your chat in a second. But I'm going to go to page 37 and 39 in the PMBOK Guide, 6th edition. And this is addressed up front in Chapter 2, the environment in which projects operate, environmental factors, environment, you see that commonality. So it says projects exist and operate in environments that may have an influence on them. These influences can have a favorable or unfavorable impact on the project. And then it shows you the influences and breaks them down into EEFs and OPAs, okay? Under EEFs, we have internal EEFs and external EEFs. So I'm going to flip the page to EEFs internal to the organization. Okay, the culture and the structure of the firm. That could govern how you manage your projects. It could influence how you manage your projects, right? It said examples include vision, mission, values, beliefs, cultural norms, all of that stuff. It could. It could influence your projects. It could firm up your process. It could tear down your process. It depends. Geographic distribution of facilities and resources. So you've got factory locations that are so far apart that it becomes very difficult to do things together physically for the project. So you've got virtual teams. It changes the way you work. It may prohibit certain projects from being done. Infrastructure, the infrastructure you have, it may enable you to work on a particular project or not. Maybe you don't have the infrastructure. It's a factor. Information technology software. Do you know that on some government projects, if you are not earned value management system compliant, you ain't gonna win that bid? And that's what they're trying to say here. The availability of particular software tools, work authorization systems, configuration management systems, web interfaces. If you are technologically challenged in a firm, you may not be able to work on certain projects, and it may be a factor in how your projects are managed. Resource availability. We don't have the people. Hey, you ain't going to get the contract. Employee capability. Examples include existing human resources, expertise, skills. So you having employees who can do this particular project, they are experienced divers, they've been on the sea, they're very marine aware, they are very much into what they do. Hey, maybe you'll get that oil and gas contract. Maybe you'll be able to do it extremely well. Employee capability, you see? So those are EEFs internal to the organization. I appreciate the likes. If you're enjoying it, just hit a like, just hit the thumbs up, and more people will be able to see it than if you didn't hit thumbs up. So I appreciate that. So internal to the organization, we've got EEFs. What about external to the organization? But let me move to page 39. All right, so it says the following EEFs are external to the organization. 1, marketplace conditions. I talked about that. 2, social and cultural influences and issues. Examples include political climate. Maybe the political climate just ain't good for business. You know what I mean, enough said. Codes of conduct, ethics, and perceptions. Maybe in a particular location, at a particular time, in a particular place, this project to work on a particular event is just not good. It's an external factor, social and cultural influences and issues. Think about it like this. What about Netflix losing $38 million because a particular actor cannot be casted anymore? A particular actor has come, we've come to know that this person, probably don't want to be watching him for a while or forever. Now, all the money's invested in that, gone down the drain. That is a factor, you see, because the perceptions, right, the perceptions of the public, that is going to affect the project. So if you like, put 20, 30, 40, 50 million into the project, because of people's perception, it's not going to fly. That's a factor. Legal restrictions in countries, rules and regulation. No, you can't do that. You can't work on that project here. You can't work on a project to kill these animals in this particular way here. Commercial databases, okay? Examples include benchmarking results, standard cost estimating data, industry risk study information. That information could impact your project, good or bad. Academic research. Some research done in the past could have a huge impact, could benefit you on your project. Government or industry standards. OSHA comes by and shuts you down. That's external to the organization, those government standards, Regulatory agency regulations and standards. Financial considerations, the exchange rate is just too high. There's no way we can do this project in the United Kingdom. The pound is just too strong, or the dollar is just too low, or the yen is too strong, or whatever it is. Physical environmental elements. Examples include working conditions, weather and constraints. Poor working conditions. Very poor working conditions, could impact your project. The food in the environment is horrible. The poor workers on the job site. For the construction project, they hate going for lunch because the lunch stinks. So you need to do something to improve those factors in some of those instances. Those are the EEFs, okay? So Ahmed, I am hoping that what I'm sharing with you is helping you a little bit. Let me know if that is helping you a little bit to better understand these factors, because these are factors, okay, that could impact your project positively or negatively. The next thing I'm going to hit on really quick, and I said it's a really quick session, but I'm going to hit on OPAs again. OPAs can be broken into two. These are organizational process assets, assets belonging to the performing organization on the project, broken into these two categories: processes and procedures, and the corporate knowledge base. Think about it like this. Imagine this was a manual in your firm. Imagine it was. I know it's the PMBOK guide. But imagine this was a manual in your firm where everything had been documented, all of your standard operating procedures, how you're meant to carry out work, how you're meant to manage the project, how you're meant to do this, that, and the other. Imagine all of that was documented here. This is an asset. This is an asset. It is not just a book, but it is an asset to your firm. Processes and procedures. You spent time, you spent sweat. Your colleagues spent time reviewing it. So it's an asset, and we call those organizational process assets. Now, these could belong to any of the organizations within the performing context, anyone performing the work. It could be you, the main, the prime, it could be the sub, right? It could be a contractor, it could be a subcontractor, but anyone performing the work, all right? These OPAs, again, influence the project. So the PMI go into a lot of detail on page 40, 41 regarding OPAs, but hey, this is the guide. If you can just remember OPAs, processes and procedures, and the corporate knowledge base, you'll be good. But let's move back to what we're talking about on integration as we attempt to close this out shortly. So I talked about develop project charter, and Ahmed asked that great question, and now we're moving on to develop project management plan. So develop project management plan is a process in which we create a plan that guides us on how to carry out the entire project. The entire project. So here we go. Planning. Developing the project management plan. One of the big inputs to this process is outputs from other processes. Now, what do we mean by outputs from other processes? I'm going to show you really quickly. I'm just going to draw a quick data flow for you. So the way this works in the world of the PMI, we have several processes. Several processes are going to give you outputs, various outputs, and these outputs are known as plans or baselines. So we've got plans and we have baselines. What is a baseline? A baseline is the original plan. It could be the original schedule that was promised, or the original cost outcome that was promised, or the original scope that was promised. All of these outputs, the baselines and the plans, we call them components of the project management plan. All of these are going to become inputs. All of these outputs from other processes are going to become inputs to the project management plan effort. So we're going to get a project management plan as we combine all of these outputs from other processes. All right, so all of these outputs from other processes are going to become part of our project management plan. And that is really what is happening in this process, develop project management plan. It's an assembly of sorts. It's assembling all the plans together to get our big project management plan. Okay? The next process here is where we take that plan and then we begin working the plan to produce deliverables. So I'd like to refer you to a page in the PMBOK guide, chapter 4. You know, one of my favorite figures in chapter 4 is figure 4-1 because it shows you all the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs in a snapshot. This is on page 71. So, you know, whenever I talk about these ITTOs, not bad to have this page open, page 71. So if you take a look, if you look at 4.2 and you look at number 2 under 4.2, it says outputs from other processes. And that's exactly what I was referring to when I showed you that image that I just drew, outputs from other processes. Because it's going to show you, you see, how all of those outputs come together when you take a look at the data flow under this particular process. So if you go to page 82 has this image. I'll just show you. See, that's page 82. And you can see that this is receiving outputs from other processes. You see, this process, develop project management plan, it is receiving outputs from other processes, and then you're going to come out with your project management plan. And then in direct and managed project work, that plan becomes an input to this. And from this, you're going to end up getting deliverables, which is why I wanted you to stay on page 71, because you're going to see all of these different things. So outputs from other processes goes into develop project management plan. We get our project management plan. And then we can see our project management plan going into direct and manage project work as an input. So we've got our project management plan going into this process, direct and manage project work. And then from here, we get a very important output known as deliverables. See? So you get your deliverable out of develop project management plan. And this input-output relationship is very important. We get project management plan going in to direct and manage project work, deliverable coming out, you see. And the map goes on and on. You might have watched my video where I show you the whole map of how deliverables get approved and so on. But this is the very beginning of how the project management plan goes in, deliverables come out. All right, so we've talked about 3 processes so far. Do you guys have any questions that I can answer about any of these processes that has thrown you for a loop? Lokesh, show up on Saturday and it's gonna come up, all right? So you got a question. Lokesh has a question on funding limit reconciliation. Very good. So I'm gonna tackle that as soon as we close out of this, Lokesh. Just hang tight, and I'm gonna cover that for you just before we get out of here, okay? But the next one is called, I hope you blocked your ears. It's called Managed Project Knowledge, okay? Managed Project Knowledge is a process that advertises the whole idea about sharing knowledge. You know, people say knowledge is power. Not if it's kept in your head and not used, it's not. But if it's shared and people take that knowledge from your head through the ability to interact with you, maybe there are forums where you can be the expert and you're giving people advice about how to do certain things, and people can learn from you what typically would be very difficult for them to understand, but there's a forum where they can interact with you. You know, for example, perhaps there's certain techniques in coding or testing that you use, and these are very hard to document. Perhaps having a forum where you could have that interaction will help people learn better. That is really what Managed Project Knowledge talks about, sharing of knowledge, tacit knowledge, knowledge that is easy, implicit, and tacit. All of this knowledge is talked about here. So the explicit knowledge is the knowledge that you can share very easily and people understand, but we have tacit knowledge that is hard to express, like your beliefs or insights, you know, or for example, playing an instrument or riding a bike. It's that feeling. You can't really teach it, but it's there and it's very hard to express. So this particular process talks about that knowledge and how to share the knowledge, okay? So I'm not going to dwell on it, but I'm going to tell you a very important output of managed project knowledge is the lessons learned register, because as you get knowledge on the project, as you go through certain experiences, you want to capture those experiences and you want people to know about them. And how do they know about them? It's through the lessons learned register, which will capture both your explicit and your tacit knowledge. So I'm going to read very quickly from the Lessons Learned Register, page 104. It says, the Lessons Learned Register can include the category and description of the situation. The Lessons Learned Register may also include the impact, recommendations, and proposed actions associated with the situation. The Lessons Learned Register may record challenges, problems, realized risks and opportunities, or other content as appropriate. It then says the Lessons Learned Register is created as an output of this process early in the project. So what are they trying to tell you? It's not a one-stop shop. You do it now, in the beginning, and again, and all through the project, okay? So that's the Lessons Learned Register. It says, at the end of a project or phase, the information is transferred to an organizational process asset called a Lessons Learned Repository, okay? So that's all I'm going to touch on. I didn't even show you the process, managed project knowledge. So we've been talking about managed project knowledge from executing. It's a new process in the PMBOK Guide, 6th edition, okay? Now, those of you who are doing the 5th, you can unblock your ears. The worst is over. We're moving on to monitor and control project work. This is a very important process because it is in this process that we derive reports. So we call them work performance reports. You guys know what these are. You know, they're nothing fancy. It's what project managers do all day long. Project managers are involved in creating these WPRs. So these work performance reports are derived by compiling work performance information. I'm going to show you really quick. So when we talk about work performance reports, there is a flow, you see, to it. We first of all start off, before we get into creating work performance reports, there is something called work performance data, WPD. And I'm going to use different color for this just so you can see it better. So we have work performance data. Work performance data is a raw observation about the project. It could be a metric. Someone says, SPI 0.8. Okay, so what? SPI 0.8 needs to be analyzed. Why is it 0.8? And how do we get it back to a 1? So the work performance data is a raw observation that comes from the direct and manage project work process. This work performance data then becomes an input to the monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration. Monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about control scope, control schedule, control risk, control procurement. All of these, they get your work performance data as an input. And then from all of these, you get work performance information as an output. This work performance information is what makes its way to the process we're looking at, called monitor and control project work. Okay? Now this is very similar in both the 5th, oh, Pimpy, what's going on? In both the 5th, did you want to eat the PMBOK Guide for lunch or what? So yeah, the work performance data goes in here, WPI goes into monitor and control project work, and it gets compiled from all of these different monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration, and ultimately we're going to get out a work performance report, WPR. That is how we get this work performance report. Let me just circle it red. Okay, so that's how we get our work performance report. Work performance data comes from direct and managed project work, goes to monitor and control project work, goes to all the monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration, I beg your pardon. Then we get work performance information, which goes to monitor and control project work. And from monitor and control project work, we get our work performance report. All right? So that's the anatomy of this process, monitor and control project work, really quick. All right? Next process here is perform integrated change control. And this is where change requests get processed. It happens in the monitoring and controlling process group. So we get change requests from different processes coming in here, and this is where the change control board or the authorities that have been authorized to approve or reject change requests do so. And from here, we can get an approved change request as an output. We can get our change log as well as an output. So if you're following along in the 6th edition, and you know, this is a sneak preview. In the actual class, we go a lot slower. I know it might be a little bit quick for some folks, but we go a lot slower just to help those who need to catch up, all right? So each chapter would take roughly 2 to 3 hours. All right, so here, I'm taking a look at page 113. We can see approved change requests coming out, and then we can also see the change log as a sub-output of the 3rd output, project documents updates. All right, so you get the whole idea. Change requests get processed in here. A group of people known as the change control board, they process the change requests, they approve or reject it, and we get that stuff out. All right, we're on to our final one, and our final process is called close project or phase. And this is where you're either closing out a process, closing out a phase, or the project. So you're closing out either one phase in the project or the project as a whole. And what do you get out of this? Well, there's a final product, service, or result transition. So let's say this was our product. It's already been approved by the customer in validate scope, and I'll talk about that when we meet and talk about chapter 5. But there is a transition of this thing because we need to send people for training, how to use this. We need to make sure that the organization's operations team has all the manuals and we hand it over to them. So there's a transition that happens, and it is in this process that the final product, service, or result transition happens. So let me just read that for you in a PMBOK guide really quick before we go to some questions. And this is on page 127. It says a product, service, or result, once delivered by the project, may be handed over to a different group or organization that will operate, maintain, and support it through its life cycle. This output refers to the transition of the final product, service, or result that the project was authorized to produce, or in the case of phase closure, the intermediate product, service, or result of that phase from one team to another. All right? So that is what happens in final product, service, or result transition. Okay? So folks, we are at the end of our little sneak preview. Okay? So it's just to show you the functionality and the makeup of the course and how it is and the interaction and so on. So accomplishments, you should be able to define integration. I told you what it was. You should be able to discuss how integration is a little bit different. The flour, eggs, milk, and sugar are the knowledge areas, but integration is what puts it all together, right? The inputs and outputs, I'm hoping that you know the output of Develop Project Charter, the output of Develop Project Management Plan. You should know the output of Manage Project Knowledge, right? All of those, I covered them, so let's go one by one. Output of the Project Charter, can someone chat into me? What is the output of the Project Charter? Arman, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us today. So what is the output? The PMIS is actually a tool and technique. So tell me, what do we get out of Develop Project Charter? The Project Charter, right? What do we get out of Develop Project Management Plan? Ahmed says the project management plan. Good. What do we get out of direct and manage project work? I showed you that as well. Do you remember? Direct and manage project work. What do we get out of that? PMP, what do we get out of direct and manage project work? Deliverables. Of course, he knew that. Deliverables. Thank you very much. What else do we get out of direct and... Oh, you beat me to it. Lokesh typed in work performance data. What do you think about that, Pimpy? Yeah, he's good. He is good. He's going to kill the exam. He's going to see you and deal mercilessly with you, Pimpy. Yeah, let him bring it on. Okay. We shall see. What do we get out of manage project knowledge? Manage project knowledge. Manage project knowledge. Chat in. Well, if you're on the 5th edition, I don't expect you to know. Did anybody catch what we get out of managed project knowledge? Okay, I guess you're all taking the 5th edition. It is the lessons learned register. All right, what do we get out of monitor and control project work? From monitor and control project work, we get, you guys know that one. It's the same in the 5th and the 6th. Work performance reports, change requests as well. Thank you very much. What do we get out of performing a graded change control? Very, very easy. Thank you, Lokesh and Deep Myth and Ahmed, appreciate that. What do you get out of performing a graded change control? Thank you, approved change request, very good. And as a sub-output in the 6th edition, we see the change log, very good. And last but not least, close project or phase. Thank you very much. We could also, get the change log, very good, as a sub-output. So tell me, what do we get out of close project or phase? Thank you, Arman. Is that from close project or phase? The project charter comes from develop project charter. Thank you, Deep Myth. The transition of the product. Final product, service, or results transition. Very good. All right, guys. So thank you very much for that. Let's answer a couple of questions. So Lokesh said, Phil, I'm confused with funding limit reconciliation. Please explain. So let's talk about funding limit reconciliation, and I'm going to draw out something here for you really quick. Now, what does it mean to reconcile? To reconcile in the world of PMI means to bring together, to bring these things back together in context. But bring what together in context? Well, funding limit reconciliation is talked about in definitely chapter 7 of the PMBOK Guide, 5th edition, and in terms of the 6th edition, this is on page 232 in the image. Again, it's the 6th edition. It is also talked about in more detail on page 253 in the 6th edition. So Lokesh, because we're covering the 6th edition, I'm just going to stick to this book, but I'm going to explain it's pretty much the same thing in the 6th and the 5th. So let's read page 253 in the 6th edition. So it reads, the expenditure of funds should be reconciled with any funding limits. So that's what they're bringing together, the expenditure of funds, what we intend spending, because remember, this is determined budget. So your project isn't live at this point, you're planning. So it says the expenditure, they should have probably said planned expenditure to make it clearer. So the planned expenditure of funds should be reconciled with any funding limits on the commitment of funds for the project. So my project is going on now, and this is the line or the baseline of events. Let me draw the baseline for you here, Lokesh. So let's say we have a baseline here, of our project, month 1, month 2, month 3, and month 4. So let's say we have January, February, March, and April. So we're working on this project and we are in the determine budget process. And in determine budget, your team and you and other people put together a baseline of how much money you expect to be spent on the project. So I'm going to use the color of green to show you how much money you said you would spend. So January, you said you would spend $2 million on the project. February, 1.5 million. It's hard to do a decimal. 1.5 million. March, 3 million. And April, let's put it at 4 million. Okay. So the total for your project is 2 plus 1.5, 3.5 million, 6.5 million, 10.5 million. So it is one thing, Lokesh, to go to your management and say, oh, we need 10.5 million for the project, versus telling them, I need 2 million in month 1, 1.5 million in month 2, 3 million in month 3, 4 million in month 4. Why do you do that? Because you want to set the tone for when those funds should be available for you on the project. If you don't let them know that you need 4 million at the end of the project, they're going to be wondering, why do you need 4 million at the end of the project? We thought that you just needed 2.5 and maybe 3 in 1 month, but you're all across the board, all the way up to 4 million. And moreover, in your organization, they say, we have a funding limit. We have never been able to get as much in revenues as such and such amount, and therefore that is a cap on how much we allow you to spend in any 1 month on a particular project. So let's say the funding limit on this project for any particular month is 2.5. You've got a 2.5 million limit in month 1, a 2.5 million limit in month 2, a 2.5 million limit in month 3 and month 4. What do you need to do, Lokesh? You need to reconcile these limits with your planned expenditure. How can we reconcile these limits? Can you chat into me, Lokesh? I'm curious to know, what would you do? If management now presents you the picture and says, project manager, you need to get creative. There's no way that can happen. We've got this funding limit. We cannot get those kind of funds at the end of the project. What do? You got to reconcile. And part of the reconciliation might be moving stuff around. Moving work around, yeah, will mess up your schedule, change your schedule. You could move some monies around. Money that you wanted to spend down here, you might have to move some of it to month 1, some of it to month 2. That could be a way out, right? What else? I'm curious to know. Let's see the chats. Rebaseline, says Ahmed. Replan. Thank you very much. So you have to do some sort of replanning, and it's really what is being referred to here as your funding limit reconciliation. So if we take a look at the image one more time, you can reconcile this in that here, this particular month, you got some wiggle room. You can take some of this and you can move it down here. You can take some of this and move it over here. You see? And as far as this is concerned, you're going to have to move some of it here as well. You know, however you decide to move stuff around, you can, There was a particular project I worked on. Now, this was a government project, and there was a limit because the agency said you cannot spend any more than X amount of millions within a particular month. The only way around it was to go to higher authorities to get really high level permission to be able to spend that money and for those funds to be made available by the agency. So let's read on page 253. Let's continue reading. It says, a variance, the variance we're talking about, or here. We got a variance of 0.5 and a variance of 1.5 here. It says a variance between the funding limits and the planned expenditures will sometimes necessitate the rescheduling of work to level out the rate of expenditures. This is accomplished by placing imposed date constraints for work into the project schedule. Date constraints such as the work for this needs to be done within this time period. If we miss this time period, we're in trouble. It has to be done now. The subcontractor has to be paid now. Project work has to be done now, that kind of thing. All right, so it's a simple rescheduling in many instances. In other instances, like the one I gave you an example of in the real world, we had to go higher than the project authority in that agency to be able to get permission to spend those funds, okay? So does that help, Lokesh? Does that help explain the mystery of funding limits, funding limit reconciliation? I hope it does help you. All right. All right, so I hope this gives you a good idea of what to expect. Remember, we have our Savage on Saturdays, where we are extremely savage in covering the content. And if you want to be part of that, subscribe. And then when we come online on Saturdays, you'll get notified and you can jump in and ask questions and enjoy the party. All right? Well, I hope that helps, and thank you very much for your audience. I wish you all the very best. Remember, no pain, no gain. You got to be like this stormtrooper. You got to be relentless. You got to load up on ammo to take out PMP. Take out this guy right here. I'm not scared of you. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Ready for action.
He's gonna deal mercilessly with you, PMP. He's armed.
Let's take this fight to the sky.
All right. Thank you very much for your audience. I wish you all the very best in your prep. Remember, Savage on Saturday. See you there. Bye for now.